Here is to a peaceful 2024. Cheers. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am making my favorite video of the year. Let's have a look at the books that I've chosen to be the representative of my 2024 year. Iris Murdoch, The Nice and the Good. This one has just been sitting on my shelf for a very, very long time. What did I read? I read The Flight from the Enchanter, and I just loved it. And then I read Under the Net. And I thought that Flight from the Enchanter was a little bit better than Under the Net, but they were still quite good, and I enjoyed them very much. I would like to read The Nice and the Good because I think Iris Murdoch is quite celebrated in Britain. I don't know if she's as well known outside of England, and she should be, because those two books that I read are fantastic, and I think this one is going to be just as good. A Whitehall civil servant shoots himself. As the ramifications of John Duquesne's inquiry spread, girls, whips, murder, blackmail, and black masses. Yipes. Duquesne finds himself more trapped than trapping. In contrast to sweltering summer London, Octavian and Kate Gray's adoring community on the Dorset coast seems idyllic, but the after effects of the suicide are soon poisoning an atmosphere already electric with the adolescent quarrels and sexual intrigue. My. Its compelling plot and admirably marshaled cast, existing in full complexity of motive, firmly place The Nice and the Good amongst the most rewarding, entertaining, and good-humored of all of Iris Murdoch's fiction. It's funny how they, I guess they took the attitude that if it's literature and it's, for those highbrow university types, there's no need to spend any money at the marketing or the cover design. Just put the name and the title and that's good enough. They'll buy it. They don't need any blue or pink, just fucking brown and orange. Excuse my French. Alain Fournier, Le Grand Meaulnes, also translated as The Wanderer, thank you, is one of the greatest French novels of the century. That is really saying something, because the more French novels I read, the more I just am filled with adoration. I love French literature. I don't know what it is. There's something so real. The characters, the psychology, the philosophy, I read French literature and I think, yes, that is life. Describing human existence. This is why I bought the novel. The only novel of a brilliant young man who was killed in action in 1914 at the age of 27. It is a masterly exploration of the twilight world between boyhood and manhood, with its mixture of idealism, realism, and sheer caprice. But that is not its only magic. There is a magic of setting, of narrative, of the haunting beauty of the heroine, of the inexplicable elusiveness of the lost domain itself. He was a soldier, and he died in the First World War. I am fanatical about reading novels related to the Second World War, and it seems as though we do not have as much knowledge about the First World War. So when I discovered this book, I was very quick to pick it up. Alain Fournier. Sorry, I know my French, butcher. Christened Henry Alban, was born in La Chapelle d'Angillon in 1886, the son of a country schoolmaster. He was educated at Brest and in Paris, where he met and fell in love with the original Yvonne, who influenced his whole life and work. In 1905, he was working in Chiswick, London. Le Grand Meaulnes, The Lost Domain, was published in 1912. Oh, wait a minute. The Lost Domain. Is it called The Lost Domain and The Wanderer? God damn. Appeared posthumously. Killed in action on the Meuse in 1914. If it is about the First World War or the Second World War, I'm very, very interested. And as sad as it is that it is from someone who was killed in the war, it is a first-hand account. It's sad and it's true. Looking forward to this one very, very much. Frederick Manning, The Middle Parts of Fortune. Born is a private fighting on the front. Self-reliant and articulate, he is under pressure to accept a commission, but he prefers to be among the ranks. Drawn into the universal struggle for survival in a world gone mad. An attempt to understand the inexplicable, Manning's moving and powerful work is unlike any other First World War novel in its depiction of the life of the ordinary British soldier, which was as much concerned with drill, transportation, rest and relaxation as the trauma and brutalities of combat. Its use of swearing, oh my, and its highly disturbing realism gave the middle parts of fortune a startling contemporaneity. Contemporaneity. Is that a real word? Well, but this is a real quote from Ernest Hemingway. The finest and noblest book of men in war that I have ever read. From the great Hemingway. Wow, there is a cover. Can you see that? They're not playing around with that cover. Frederick Manning was born in Sydney, Australia. Oh, I didn't know that. In 1882. Prevented by asthma from attending the usual educational institutions, he was taught largely at home, and at the age of 16 was sent to England to live with a family friend, Arthur Galton, a rural clergyman who knew Ezra Pound, Max Beerbohm, and Richard Aldington, who's also on the list today. Soon Manning was writing narrative poems, essays, and stories in the genteel style of the period, and was also reviewing for The Spectator. In 1914, he joined the army, and as a soldier in the ranks, ultimately fought in the terrible battles on the Somme. In 1929, he published privately and anonymously The Middle Parts of Fortune. His novel was about military life because its language was thought too obscene for general circulation, and an expurgated edition titled Her Private's We, that's a terrible title, was issued in 1930. Later, Manning wrote journalism and traveled in search of better health. He died in London in 1935 and it was only in 1943 that his name appeared on the title page of his book. It's amazing, isn't it, that once upon a time people could write novels and somehow those novels were lost, or I guess they just were not popular. And if they were not popular, they were not printed and they were not circulated, they were not advertised, and people, if they didn't have one on the shelf, which was probably quite rare at the time because it wasn't as wealthy as we are now that you could afford to have the luxury of all these books behind you. So you might write a world-changing book, and yet the world might forget about you. Two great books from the First World War, the French and the British. That pleases me very much. This is going to be a reread for me. I read this quite a long time ago. I think I read it in about 2005, somewhere around there. Under the Volcano by Malcolm Lowry. And actually, I am living relatively close to where he wrote this book. He built some kind of a cottage or a bit of a, I don't know how much of a shed or if it was like actually a proper domicile, but he built a log cabin somewhere up the British Columbian coast, and he lived there and he wrote this book. And I should really go and have a look at it. If you don't know what this book is about, it's about alcoholism. Lowry was a terrible, terrible alcoholic. I don't think it's based on his life. This is a work of fiction. Anybody who has some first-hand knowledge of alcoholism knows that it's in there. Geoffrey Firmin, a former British consul, has come to Mexico. His debilitating malaise is drinking, an activity that has overshadowed his life. On the most fateful day of the consul's life, the Day of the Dead in 1938, his wife Yvonne, another Yvonne, arrives inspired by a vision of life together away from Mexico and the circumstances that have driven their relationship to the brink of collapse. She is determined to rescue Firmin and their failing marriage, but her mission is further complicated by the presence of Hugh, the consul's brother, and Jacques, a childhood friend. The events of this one significant day unfold against an unforgettable backdrop of a Mexico at once magical and diabolical. One man's constant struggle against the elemental forces that destroy him. Well, not elemental, the, bottled spirits. Malcolm Lowry, 1909 to 1957. Man, didn't even make it to 50 years. Was born in England. He attended Cambridge University. He spent much of his life traveling and lived in Paris, New York, Mexico, Los Angeles, Canada, and Italy, among other places. He is the author of numerous works. He's not really the author of numerous works. This is the main work that he's known for. Under the Volcano. So I've read this one before, and it affected me. You just keep asking the question, when will you stop drinking? When? What does it take? What will cause you to realize that if you don't stop drinking, you will die? Is that information not enough for you, that it will kill you shortly if you don't stop immediately? North America, especially on the West Coast, there's this epidemic of drug use and drug overdose, and you ask the same question, do you not know that death is hovering above your head if you don't immediately stop doing that thing that you're doing? Please stop it, or you will die. And when you're dead, it is forever and ever and ever. If you're in that position, perhaps death is not so much of a cruelty. What a tragedy. On that happy note, The Death of a Hero by Richard Aldington. Oh, with a quote from Lawrence Durrell. Death of a Hero occupies a very select place in the literature of the First World War. It is the best war novel of the epoch, in fact, as well as the greatest of Aldington's books. It will certainly never fade away, by Lawrence Durrell. You know, Lawrence Durrell, the author of the Alexandria Quartet. First published in 1929, Death of a Hero was described by its author as both a jazz novel and a memorial to a generation. The hero is George Winterbourne. Leaving the Edwardian gloom of his embattled parents behind him, George escapes to Soho, which buzzes, on the eve of war with talks of politics, pacifism, and free love. Oh my. Free love, 1929. Ooh, starting early in England. He paints, he marries, he takes a mistress, the perfect hero of his time, whose destiny, like all those of that lost generation, is the bloody nightmare of the trenches. Christ. Now reissued in a fully unexpurgated edition, Aldington's chronicle of the life and loves of his doomed favorite of the gods is a searing testament to the corrosive waste of human warfare. One of the great novels of the First World War, Richard Aldington, 1892 to 1962. Oh, he was married to H.D. Hilda Doolittle. Wow, I didn't know that. Who's Hilda Doolittle? She wrote some very famous poems. First World War, again, looking forward to this very, very much. It's a shame this book is so fragile because I'm terribly hard on my books. You know, I read them in the bath. This one I can't read in the bath. I mean, it will just blow up like a sponge. This is a strange one, I believe. Michel Tournier, The Ogre, an international bestseller. The Ogre is a masterful tale of innocence, perversion, and obsession, following strange, gentle, able Tiffauges's passage from submissive schoolboy to ogre of the Nazi school at the castle of Kaltenborn. It takes us deeper into the dark heart of fascism than any novel since The Tin Drum. Oh, good. Until the very last page, when Abel meets his mystical fate in the collapsing ruins of the Third Reich, it shocks us, dazzles us, and above all, holds us spellbound. All right, first page. January the 3rd, 1938. You're an ogre, Rachel used to say to me sometimes. An ogre. A fabulous monster emerging from the mists of time. Well, yes, I do think there's something magical about me. I do think there's a secret collusion deep down connecting what happens to me with what happens in general, and enabling my particular history to bend the course of things in its own direction. I like that already. I don't know what it is, but somehow I like that. I think I picked this one up because it's on Harold Bloom's list of the Western canon, if I'm not mistaken. That very strange book that I've never ever heard of, nor the author. 373 pages is not very bad. Are you noticing the tone of the novels? Silver Stallion, a novel of Korea. Silver Stallion, the world army of the great American general Megado MacArthur has made a daring amphibious landing at Incheon to liberate Korea, near a mountain village. The liberators set up a special encampment called Texas Town, where local women receive them. The disdainful villagers call these women Yankee wives. Among them is the hero's mother. Oh my. Ang Junghyo was born in Seoul in 1941, where he still resides. After studies at Sogang Jesuit University, he worked as a reporter, columnist, and editor. The Korean War, also known as the Forgotten War, because in North America at least, I'm sure that in Korea the situation is quite different, but in North America we have a lot of films and literature about the Second World War. And we have a lot of films, not so much literature, about the Vietnam War. But between the two, in the early 1950s, there was the Korean War, and aside from the television show MASH, who knows anything about the Korean War? I do not. And that is why I have the book on the list for this year, is because I hope to know more about the Korean War from reading it. Also, as an ESL teacher, I had many, many Korean students, and I'm very curious about Korea. Korea, it seems to be such a place that, for me, is very, very difficult to understand. And I hope that I will learn more about the history and the Korean people, the character, something. I need to learn about Korea. Like, there was a war there. The Americans went to war there, and yet, what do we know about it? The Berlin Stories by Christopher Isherwood. Last year or 2 years ago, I read A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood, and it was just fantastic. Christopher Isherwood was a British man who was very outwardly gay in a time when it was not socially common. Lived in Berlin. He traveled to China. A poet, was it Auden? I think he traveled to China with Auden. He was the poet who wrote Stop All the Clocks. Then he moved to America, and he moved to California, and he was openly gay in a time when it was quite scandalous. And he took some pleasure in going to parties with his much younger lover, much younger. Although I don't think Christopher Isherwood is very commonly known. But perhaps that's because his output as an author is very small, as far as I'm aware. Like there is the A Single Man, which I reviewed last year, and there's a link here or here. There's a link somewhere on the screen right now that you can click on to get to that. And you should have a look at it because it's excellent. And then there's this, The Berlin Stories. This was the other thing that he wrote. First published in 1935 and 1939, the two related novels, The Last of Mr. Norris and Goodbye to Berlin. They were two separate books which have been compiled to make The Berlin Stories, are recognized today as classics of modern fiction. A charming city of avenues and cafes, a grotesque city of night people, and I practiced saying this before the video, fantasts. 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 I don't know if it's a word, it must be. A dangerous city of vice and intrigue, a powerful city of millionaires and mobs. All this was Berlin in 1931, the period when Hitler was beginning his move to power. Here are Mr. Norris, the improbable old debauchee, mysteriously caught in the struggle between the Nazis and communists. Plump Fraulein Schroeder, who thinks an operation to reduce the scale of her buste might relieve her heart palpitations. The Landauers, a distinguished and doomed Jewish family. Sally Bowles, whose misadventures in the demi-monde were popularized on the American stage and screen by Julie Harris in I'm a Camera and by Liza Minnelli in Cabaret. Christopher Isherwood, he wrote the script for Cabaret. I think that was what gave him more lasting notoriety, fame. The Samurai by Shusaku Endo. There he is, smiling. 2 years ago I read Silence, and I did a review, and I'll also post a link to the review of Silence. It's a very good review. People love it. So this will be the second book by Endo that I'm reading. Shusaku Endo was not your typical Japanese author. He was a devout Catholic, which is highly unusual in Japan. As I understand, even today, for a Japanese person to say that they are Catholic is an oddity, and people really take notice and their eyebrows go up because Catholicism was severely outlawed for 300 years, 400 years. And like the punishment was torturous death. Like whole villages would be punished for harboring Catholics. In October 1613, 4 Japanese samurai set sail for Mexico. Oh, god damn, that's good already. In a specially constructed galleon. They were accompanied by a Spanish priest who was to act as an interpreter. The ostensible purpose of this unprecedented mission was to bargain trading privileges with the West against the right for European missionaries to preach Christianity in Japan. I didn't even understand what I just read. Unprecedented mission, bargain trading privileges with the West against the right for European missionaries to preach Christianity in Japan. I suppose that means that they're trying to set up a trade route with North America so that they do not have to have all these meddling European Jesuits spreading Christianity in Japan. Unable to achieve their purposes in Mexico, the envoys traveled on to Spain and Italy to audiences with Philip III of Spain and Pope Paul IV, becoming some of the first Japanese ever to set foot in Europe. Is that true? In The Samurai, Shusaku Endo has used this almost forgotten chapter in Japanese history as a basis for a remarkable work of fiction, transforming the envoy's dramatic mission into a gripping tale of adventure and a moving record of the spiritual journey undertaken at the heart of one man, a simple rural samurai who was plucked from obscurity to act as a chief envoy. Even if it's even slightly a true story, can you imagine 1613 samurai sent to Mexico and then to Italy and Spain? The history of the world is more bizarre than any author could ever fictionalize. It is just impossible. Bewildered by the sudden change in his circumstances, I guess so, but determined to fulfill his duty as a good Japanese person, Hasakura endures countless hardships as he strives to accomplish his mission, and constantly at his side until the very end of the journey is Valesco, the ambitious Franciscan missionary who is as eager to defeat his Jesuit rivals as he is to bring the word of God to the heathen nation. I think the heathen nation is Japan there. Quote from Graham Greene. Endo, to my mind, is one of the finest living novelists. That is very high praise coming from Graham Greene. So there we go, The Samurai. You should not be intimidated to think that because the novel is set in 1613, that means that it's going to be something so old-fashioned that you can't even really comprehend it. No, he was writing it in the 20th century, so yeah, it's going to be written in 20th century, translated English. It's going to be good. It's going to be very, very good, that novel. The last one on the list, Alberto Moravia, 1934, also on the list of Harold Bloom's Western canon. In this new novel, 1934, Moravia returns to Italy in the time of Mussolini, a territory he understands better than anyone. Set on the island of Capri in 1934, the book is, on the surface, a strange love story. A young man tempted to suicide travels to Capri to regain control of his life. During his stay there, he meets a young German woman, and it is their relationship in all its mysterious, troubling contours around which the story revolves. All of Moravia's novel have described love brilliantly. In 1934, the author's two great subjects, politics and love, are masterfully intertwined. The book is both a portrait of strong emotions and a record of a terrible time. Erotic, passionate, profound. 1934 is one of Moravia's greatest achievements, and there he is, right there, and you don't take that man lightly. So, those are the 10 books on my TBR list for 2024. Quite a lot of war. Anyway, sorry, this video is a shambles, and I think it's already an hour long if the camera hasn't run out of batteries by now. So I'll just say goodbye for now. That is 2024 TBR. I am super excited. It's gonna be a dark year. I chose those novels because of the American election. I know that I should not be so pessimistic and so anxious, but it just seems like ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, it just seems like we've been on the brink of calamity. It just seems we're so close to the end. And it's a shame because there's so many books to read. And yet, you know, we've come to near nuclear war, and we've come to almost absolute environmental catastrophe, and nothing is being done, and we just keep moving in the same direction. And you know, we have some protests, but it doesn't seem like we have any positive movement in a regenerative sense. Like, we have peace talks, but just we're holding our machine guns at the other person with our fingers on the trigger saying, I'm ready to kill you if you take the wrong step. And it seems the same with the environment, that we're just, I suppose because, you know, the environment is something that is destroyed 1 meter at a time. Well, isn't that a nice way to end the video? Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you want to join me on my TBR for 2024, please come along. It's going to be a black year, but perhaps if we really go deep into the darkness, we will come out the other side more positive, more optimistic, more hopeful. God, I hope so. Thank you for watching. Kampai. Following strange, gentle, able Tifauges's passage from a submissive schoolboy. Schoolboy. Goddamn, drunk. This video just goes on and on. Oh fuck, how long is this fucking video? A little bit terrified of the upcoming American elections. It's a shame that it has to be this way, doesn't it? Like, it has to be so polarizing, and it has to be so violent, and it has to be so us versus them all of the time.